welcome to everyone who is present today for the presentation. So in some sense, my objective for the first few minutes that I'm going to share this is to give you something new, share with something that you might already be familiar, and hopefully provoke you in some fashion that makes you think, oh, I never heard this, or I don't know if this is true, or is this really true? Okay, and if I can create those kind of feelings as you listen to this, then I'll consider this as a successful event. So quickly, the subject: ancient Indian astronomy, and how that is, or especially that was, the key to ancient Indian prosperity. So when we are on this earth, we think in terms of the basic needs initially. Okay, so first thing we feel immediately is that we want to breathe, okay, to sustain this life. Then we may feel thirsty, then we may feel hungry, then we may feel cold or hot, depending on the location. Then we need some clothing, and it might rain, or it might be very hot sun, and we want some protection, so we need a roof where we can have a shelter. So we think in terms of these basic needs, but after that we need many other things to have a fulfilling life. And in the Indian tradition, I mean, I don't need to tell this audience about the four purusharthas, and I'm not going to spend time on these four purusharthas, but the Indian tradition beautifully defined the purpose of life in terms of four purusharthas: dharma, artha, kama, moksha. And in order to achieve that, we need health, wealth, and intellect. And I'm going to quote this one Rick or Richa, and you have to correct me the singular versus the plural, from Rigved 8 Mandal, 66th Sukta. And this is my favorite. It has become favorite for a while. And so I'm going to say it also. Again, yeah, I'll ask for forgiveness with my non-existent understanding of Rigveda, how to say it. Om Tvanno asya amate rutakshudo o abhishaste ravasprudi Tvanna uti tava chitraya diya shiksha shachishta gatuvita. And what this verse is giving, of course, this is a prayer to Indra at a certain level. That's what it means. Like, as many of you would know, that Rigveda, not just Rigveda, all of our ancient Indian narratives, including Mahabharata, including Ramayana, including Bhagavad Gita, which is part of Mahabharata, we get different layers of meanings. And how do we get those meanings? It depends on if we have a good guidance from somebody, that person, the guru, that person can elucidate different meanings. We, with our own tapasya, own shraddha, and own abhyas, we can also derive different meanings as we get different experiences in life. So one can find many different meanings out of this. Okay, so at a very first level, it is a prayer to Indra. And what the sages are saying is that give us, share with us. Okay, not give us in a way, share with us, because the responsibility is on the person to learn it at the end of the day. Share with us all the different skills that you have. Create a web, uti, create a web of these different skills, and be our mentor, be our guide, be our pathfinder. That is the word gatuvit. For what? Why do the sages want Indra, the teacher, to share these skills? So that the individual can get rid of amati kshudha abhishastu. Okay, amati kshudha abhishastu. In a very crude way, I'm going to translate that as a health, wealth, and intellect. Okay, so get rid of amati, meaning to have an intellect, to have a prajna, to have the right mindset. To get rid of kshudha, the hunger, which means to have the resources, okay, to sustain oneself. In that sense, I'm using the word wealth. And abhishastu literally would mean curse, but that also means, when we are not feeling well, we might say, I don't feel well, as if like I'm cursed. And in that sense, to have a good health, a good balance, so that's what the basic things that are expected. Not very basic if you look at it. Also the intellect, is uh, is requested right into this mantra. Now, what this has to do with astronomy or prosperity? Well, the prosperity is there. Prosperity not just in terms of the resources, but prosperity in terms of health and also intellect. If you don't have a good health, then none of these things matter. Actually, you feel miserable, no matter what else you have. Okay. And so to gain this, if you want to translate those into, say, different skill set or different tools, okay, and how we are going to sustain this, how we are going to do this, which is, I'm just making simplifying here for the subject that I am going to discuss today, the ancient Indian astronomy and its relevance for ancient Indian prosperity, is the agriculture, Ayurveda, yoga, commerce, navigation. And of course, I can add a few more things. I did not add, just to ensure everyone can read what it is and not fill my slide. It's already filled. Now, what is the relationship of astronomy to agriculture? What is the relationship of astronomy to Ayurveda, to yoga, to commerce, to navigation, and many other skills that we need? That's what briefly we are going to look at. But we are going to look at some additional aspects of astronomy as the Indian astronomy, as they relate to Indian civilization. Okay, you cannot separate Indian civilization from Indian astronomy and vice versa. Okay, so now astronomy as a Jyotish Shastra, but in the Indian context, it was a very broad discipline. So, for example, astrology will also be part of it. Panchang will also be part of it. So, astrology in the sense of a Phala Jyotish, okay, it might have a sense of a Muhurta, a auspicious time, and so on, which also can be found from a Panchang with some knowledge of astrology and astronomy. And the Panchang is there for the calculation, the chronological tracking of time for the events. Okay. All right. So the question, how old is Indian astronomy? Which is also synonymous with asking the question, how old is Indian civilization? Okay. At some point, astronomy began in Indian civilization. At some point, Indian civilization began. If we go back, a time comes beyond which we don't have any discernible evidence that we can say, okay, it started exactly on this date. No. And therefore, you'll find the metaphorical descriptions eventually going back. Where do they go? They go to the Brahma, the creator, and then it goes beyond Brahma. Those of you are familiar with the Nasadiya Sukta of Rigveda, it talks about the time before even the gods existed and so on. We will not go that far. But let's see, with the available evidence that we have, how far back we can go to understand how old is Indian astronomy and therefore how old is Indian civilization. Surya Siddhanta. Now, this may shock a number of you, and this may surprise you, many of you. This may make many of you happy, and many of you feel incredulous. Like, is this true? What is this person talking? Okay. If you have any of these emotions, those are right emotions. Surya Siddhanta updates. Now, Surya Siddhanta, I'll briefly mention. So, in astronomy, Indian astronomy, we have many texts. It's very rich. Not many people know about it. Not many people realize. And I am saying it's a very rich database that is available in spite of the fact that there is a lot more that is more than likely lost. Okay, because through the manuscripts and the preservation of manuscripts and whatnot. So Surya Siddhanta is one of the prime and important text of Indian astronomy. It comes from a Siddhanta period, and I'll not go into that today. On this, we get into question answer. This is a text. It is very much revered, very much respected, not only in India, but around the world. And I will talk about briefly maybe, the development of the European Renaissance that started approximately 500 years ago. And suddenly, out of nowhere, they came out of a dark age, and they admit that, by the way. And suddenly, a lot of scientific and technological development took place. And India was very much responsible for that Indic Renaissance in an indirect fashion, which is to say, India itself didn't do anything, but they came took our manuscripts, translated them, and took it to the Arabian countries, but also beyond, all the way through the Islamic area of control, all the way to Spain, and from Spain to rest of the Europe. But let me bring you back to Surya Siddhanta. Now, this is a work of many other researchers, but especially in the recent times, I'm referring to three names there. One is Anil Narayanan, so Dr. Anil Narayanan. He was a ISRO scientist. Now he is a consultant in North America, in United States. My co-researcher and co-conspirator in many of my research adventures, Mrs. Rupa Bhati, I think she has been also to Velianar campus at some point for some conference, and then myself. Just these three if you look at the works of these three individuals, you can find their works taking to these updates in Surya Siddhanta. Now, when do we update something? We update something when, just like in our house, we need some repair to the kitchen area or whatever area, or need to replace the roof, when we have this house for a long time. Okay, it's the same thing. Think of these are Surya Siddhanta updates. And if we look at the evidence of Surya Siddhanta and objectively test it in a scientific fashion, we find these updates. Surya Siddhanta updates, the latest one goes back to like approximately 1500 years, at that 580 CE. It's not exact year. It can be 570 and 560 and 600, or that's fine. Okay, 550 C is also fine. So take these numbers sometime with a grain of salt. Grain of salt in the sense it's not exact 1 year. Sometimes they are, by the way. 3000 BC, 5500 BC, that is contemporary to the timing of Mahabharata. Like I have, based on my work, as Professor Gauriji mentioned, like I have defined the timing of Mahabharata as 5561 BC, more than 7500 years ago. There is an update in Surya Siddhanta that occurred around 7800 BCE, which is what? Almost like 10,000 years ago. Okay. There is another update in 12,000 BC. That is what myself and Mrs. Bhati, we presented at Oxford. Three different references coming together from Surya Siddhanta, showing only one particular epoch. Okay, no other is possible, and that takes us to 12,000 BC. That's more than 14,000 years ago. Again, contemporary to the Ramayana times. Again, that I have defined the dating as 12,209 BC, very, very close to that. There are other, this 14,500 is an indirect reference, but again, it very nicely ties Mahabharata and Surya Siddhanta together. Okay, there are other references. This is now coming from Rigveda combined with Surya Siddhanta, going back to 28,000 BC. That's the initiation and then eventually stabilization of monsoon around 28,000 BC. There is a specific reference, I'll not go into this. It ties certain Upanishad, believe it or not, Maitrayani Upanishad combined with Ramayana lineage and combined with Surya Siddhanta takes us to 34,500 BC. And again, Surya Siddhanta takes us back to 38,000 BC. So we are saying these are the updates. We don't know when actually Surya Siddhanta began. Okay, all right. Now, Aryabhatiya, I'm not going to spend time, but it's also very old. Right now, people think Aryabhatiya is only 1500 years old. Just like Europeans thought Surya Siddhanta is 1500 years old. Okay, and they gave all kinds of bad names to Surya Siddhanta, only to be surprised time and again. Aryabhatiya is also very old. Right now, people think it's 1500 years old. Some people just take it another 1,000 years, 2,000 years. Actually, it's much, much older, and that's something we are working on very, very soon. I hope to publish that work. Now, in the astronomy, as I said, there are a lot of literature, numerous Siddhanta, Karana text, and Tantra text. I'm not going to the detail, but think of this as a Siddhanta may be more comprehensive. Karana may be for popular reading of astronomy, and Tantra could be in between, and maybe sometime focused on a specific aspect of astronomy. Like, for example, there is a Parashar Tantra, or I said Surya Siddhanta, Aryabhatiya, and there are many other Siddhantas. Okay, and Indian astronomy, we can assert, I assert, but we can assert that it's the most accurate astronomy science until last 300 years. So what happened in last 300 years? Well, it is the Newton coming out, and then people refining with Lagrange, and then Einstein, and then Hubble telescopes and space age, So we are getting a lot better readings, and that has definitely taken the astronomy beyond what Indian astronomy has achieved. But the important point is, until say last 300 years, Indian astronomy was the most accurate and most precise astronomy anywhere in the world, bar none, no ifs, no buts. Now let's look at some of the ingenious aspects of Indian astronomy. I'm just going showing you a quick comparison of Indian and Greek planetary models. And it is also for a reason. You would have definitely heard many claims that Indian astronomy was essentially a borrowed science from Greek astronomy. There are many Indic researchers, even frankly, even the pro-India researchers who are still stuck in this particular viewpoint. If I come to know of them, I contact them, I ask for evidence, and then they run away. This is a consistent phenomenon I'm seeing for 10 years. And if somebody claims something, but somebody doesn't have evidence to back it up, Hitchens razor, there was a famous famous atheist from UK called Christopher Hitchens, very wonderful person, brilliant person. And one of his quote I love, which goes by the name Hitchens razor, which says, a claim made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. So there is no evidence whatsoever that can be objectively tested that will show that astronomy came from Greece to India. But let me just show you here quickly a comparison of Indian and Greek planetary model. And remember the timing. The Greek astronomy or Greek civilization does not go beyond 1000 BC. It does not go beyond 3000 BC. Let's give them a benefit of doubt and let's give them 4000 years. Okay, so it definitely doesn't go even by their own estimate beyond 4000 years. And this is what they did. So they used certain system called single epicycle, central crank mechanism. I'll not go into the technical terms. Bottom line, it was a geometric way of figuring things out. Okay, and you don't find many text there, by the way. Whereas in India, we are rich with all these texts as a evidence, and you don't have to just trust the text. You can take the statement of the text and verify it objectively, even today's time, or going back in antiquity. In fact, that's how what I described on the previous page, we could determine the different times the Surya Siddhanta was updated. Look at the third column of Indian model. I don't want you to go into the technical details, but just see the simplicity of it. The first one, SPE, is a single pulsating epicycle. That is the equation of the sun. And do you know what? That equation of the sun in Surya Siddhanta is most accurate and precise. And that's how we can find out when it was built, going back to 5500 BCE, 5300 BC to 5500 BC. That is when it's the most accurate, as if like when it was created. And over time, because of the changes in the astronomy parameters, the equation has changed. Nothing wrong with the equation, just the astronomy parameters change. And look at the last one, how they use that same SPE is a common concept for finding the mean position of the moon. The most accurate model of the moon, okay, vastly superior to the Greek model. Remember, position of the moon is the toughest. Newton was struggling with it. His theory was ready, but he was struggling with it for 15 years, 15 years, because moon was not yielding. The moon's position, moon's equation was not yielding to him, okay? And then look at the different planets. You'll see a very consistent double pulsating epicycle. I'll come to that in a second so that you're not just hearing the words and saying, my God, this is too technical. The point I want to say is, until Newton, the Western astronomy relied on essentially geometric manipulations for astronomy, and nothing wrong with it, by the way, because Indians also used it very heavily. Indian built astronomy, okay, built astronomy based on geometry, and that's why you also see that in a yajna and whatnot. Okay, there is again, yajna is very well connected with astronomy. I'll not talk about that today. Whereas Indian astronomy was using these formulas since ancient times. Even the Europeans who came to India in their, I'm talking of the 14th century, 15th century, 16th century, 17th century, they have documented Indians making quick calculations just by using, some numbers with just a hand, essentially hand, and predicting the positions of the planets. They had the formulations. They will look at the verses from texts such as Surya Siddhanta, Aryabhatiya, and many other texts that would have been there. Okay. All right, some other aspects of the ingenious aspect, very practical and very pragmatic. Here I want to spend some time because that connects with the prosperity. Now remember, to have a prosperity, what do we need? Okay, so health, yes, so do good exercise, have a good nutrition, which means good food. You have to have a variety, balanced food. Okay, so some ingredients are not available in your area, you have to get it from somewhere, which means travel, which means transport, which means navigation, which means commerce. Okay, and then what? Food, agriculture. For a good agriculture cycle, you need to know when to sow the seeds, okay, when to harvest certain things, not just the grains I'm talking, but harvest the fruits and so on and so forth. Again, you need a good calendar, again, which that comes from astronomy because of seasons. And we will talk about the health in the sense of Ayurveda. But think of a navigation and a commerce. And for a minute, I'm going to talk about the navigation in the sense of the oceanic navigation. Okay, there it also, astronomy is useful for land navigation also, like traveling on the land too, but especially on the ocean where you don't have any reference marks. And something beautiful here. Look at the numbers if it makes sense. The left side is the Greek model. Okay, the Greek model of last 3,000 years or 2,500 years. I am talking of the other models that you can put a number that you like, okay? Very ancient. The Greek model used for the astronomy purposes a radius of 60. The number sounds good, right? 60 seconds, 60 minutes. It's extremely cumbersome the way that is used. Look how they had to position it. I'm not going to give you a technical thing on this, but the Earth is not at the center, nor the sun is at the center, okay? And then the planets are also not necessarily revolving around the Earth or sun, but they are revolving around the other kind of equants and other center points and other epicycles and so on. What Indian astronomers did, this is extremely ingenious, extremely practical, extremely pragmatic, is that they put the Earth at the center. Why? Not that because they did not understand the solar system. No. If you are living on the Earth, you need, for all practical purposes, the observations from the Earth. So they put Earth at the center. But guess what? Now you may know that the orbits of the planets are not exactly circular, but they are elliptical. Whereas the Greek method tried to do it with the help of epicycles, that making some secondary circles. The Indians had pulsating epicycles. Indians had epicycles, but they had a pulsating epicycles. And that allowed them to essentially mimic the elliptical orbits of the planets. Okay, so that is that pulsating epicycles. Something else. Do you see that number 3438? And you should wonder, and I have written it in the note there. It's a very curious number they use for the radius. Do you know what it is? And that's the beauty of it. If you take the radius of 3438 in their calculation, looks like a very arbitrary number, right? In a way it is. But if you want to find out, if you are navigating around the world, like you are a global trotter, and going into the planes around the world, you need to know, if you are on the ocean, where you are, how far you have traveled, okay, and how far you need to go to your next destination, okay, essentially mapping of the globe. And how do you calculate, those of you, the math whiz there, how do you calculate the circumference, okay, of a circle, or in this case, a sphere, you can say? The formula is circumference is 2 pi r. Now, this is that radius, guys. 3438 is the radius, times 2 times pi is what? 3.14. If you combine, you're going to find something interesting. I'm going to write the conclusion so that you can relate to this. The number that will come out is 21,600. 21,600. And you can go to Wikipedia and check. The nautical mile, okay, the number of nautical miles around the equator, if you go to ancient times, that length, the perimeter, you can say, or circumference, was 21,600. Okay, so where did it come from? We'll wait for a minute. But at the equator, if you consider, they define the nautical mile as such that the whole circle can be divided into 21,600 parts. Now, here the beauty of Indian astronomy comes in. Indians employed the mathematical sophistication. That's why they chose this number, okay, 3438. And they coupled it with a naked eye resolution. Do you know what is the naked eye resolution? If you look at the sky, a certain object, and with your good 20/20 eyesight, your ability to look at two different points very close to each other in the sky and to see them as two different points. After some point, you might see that as just one point. That is your resolution of your naked eye. And that happens to be 1 arc minute. And what is the beauty of that 1 arc minute? If you take this whole circle, you will find that those 21,600 are essentially arc minutes of a 360 degrees converted into arc minutes. What does that mean? A captain of a ship in ancient times, Rigvedic times, going over the sea can continue to take the readings of the sky. Okay, of course, during the daytime, even the position of the sun, but at night times, the stars and well-known stars and pole stars, and decide how far the ship has traveled. Or due to the storm, if they have been totally disoriented, he can figure out, or she can figure out, where exactly they are right now and which direction they need to go. They coupled the mathematical sophistication with a naked eye resolution, and that's the beauty of that number 3438. Okay, you can find out. So therefore, astronomy units, arc second, arc minutes are from that. Unit of distance, at least on the sea, as a nautical mile, is from that. And based on these astronomy parameters, you can find out where you are in case you lose the track of your ship. Okay. All right. Let's look at something else. Now I'm going back to Surya Siddhanta. This is from the 12th chapter. You know, it goes as a Madhyamadhikar, Goladhikar, Bhugola, you know, and things like that, you know. Atyasanna tayatena grishme tivra kararave deva bhage suranam tu hemante mandatanyatha. This is, I'm pulling from the paper that I presented at Oxford, you know, along with Mrs. Bhatti. Quick translation: the sun is now, again, you know, anytime we get to a translation, guys, depending on your knowledge of astronomy, you are going to translate one way or the other. Okay, you can find possibly 3 translations, but here is the point, just bear with me. The sun is the closest to the earth during the Grishma and the farthest from the earth during Hemanta. In fact, I'm going to give you 2 different translations. Now, what does that mean? It will look something like this. You know that Earth's orbit around the sun is also not exactly circular, it's a bit elliptical. At some point, Earth is farthest from the sun, and sometimes it's closest to the sun. That is what it is referring to here. Okay, and I'll give you a second interpretation. So it's saying the peak of Hemanta, okay, is the near apopsis, which is to say when Earth is farthest from the sun, and the peak of Grishma is closest to the sun. Okay, so Surya Siddhanta is describing a particular time in our history when such a situation existed, because that's not the case today. In fact, our today's case is approximately, but exactly opposite. Okay, now I'm giving you another translation of the same words, not twisting it, by the way, because that's what sometimes people think. No, you can understand it tivra in this case in the sense of a speed, and manda in terms of a speed, which is actually there in the previous thing that I showed also. But because it's not interactive, I'm not going to ask you a question and wait for an answer. But if I ask, what are you seeing in this bottom picture, which looks like an eyeball here, you know, do you know what you are saying? You are essentially looking at the description, illustration, definition of Kepler's law. Essentially, Kepler created the 3 laws, and then Newton came and put a formula to it. You know, if I can simplify that, Newton did something more, but not that much more. So this is a Kepler's law, is there in Surya Siddhanta. And how old is it? We are going to look at it. Okay. Now, in that 12th chapter, besides that verse that I showed you, that the peak of Hemanta was where Earth was farthest from the sun, peak of Grishma was when Earth was the closest to the sun. Besides that description, in that same chapter, you see a description where I will not read the verse, where it is describing the presence of 2 pole stars. Okay, now that's when people get into changing the translation. Because see, if somebody is trying to translate it today and doesn't understand astronomy, doesn't have an astronomy background, or doesn't understand or believe in the antiquity of Indian astronomy, the person will say, hold on, there is only 1 pole star in the northern hemisphere right now. There is no pole star in the southern hemisphere right now. So what are they talking? Well, time, go back in time. Okay, reverse the whole clock and go back. And so Surya Siddhanta is talking of a time when there are 2 bright pole stars and they can be seen from the equator, and that's what it is referring to. in that same chapter, Surya Siddhanta also describes the obliquity. Okay, Earth is at an angle. Right now, it's a 23.45, 4 or 5. It is saying it was 24. Okay, and there are two places in Surya Siddhanta that it talks of obliquity, at what an angle. I'm going to go fast in the sense of not to boggle you with the technical details, but this is guys what we did. So the first reference, the peak of Hemanta, peak of Grishma, two pole stars, and obliquity of 24, and it's coming from the same chapter. Okay, when this can come together, remember, to define a line we need two data points, like 2 points we can draw a line. To define a curve we need at least 3 points. We have a 3 points here, just metaphorically speaking, and I actually gave you the time. The only time, and just for a simplicity, let's say last 100,000 years, 1 lakh years. Okay, you can go 2 lakhs if you like, 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs, it doesn't matter, but just say last 100,000 years, because many people fall off their chairs, if when they hear 7,500 years ago. If you go for last 100,000 years, there is only one time in the history of humanity when the obliquity of the Earth is 24 degree. There were two bright pole stars, and the peak of Hemanta was when Earth was farthest, and peak of Grishma when Earth was the closest, and that comes to 12,000 BCE. That is, I just wanted to give you a demonstration, just a quick illustration of how we identify the updates to Surya Siddhanta. So that is one update that happened 12,000 years ago. Now, so far I'm just talking of astronomy. Now you must be wondering, what about prosperity? Well, Galileo, if you know, he looked at the sky through the telescopes and showed that the celestial is equal to terrestrial. Because until then, at least in the Western Europe, people were thinking that we have all the defects on the earth, ups and downs, mountains and oceans and valleys and whatnot. But up there, everything is smooth and polished. Okay, because when they look through the naked eye, that's what they could see. When Galileo pointed the telescope, for example, at the moon, he said, hey, that looks like Earth, all kinds of digs, all kinds of craters and stuff like that, rough surface. Then he pointed at the Jupiter and he said, oh, interesting, just like Earth has a moon, even the Jupiter has a moons. Okay, of course, by the way, sidebar, Indians did know that the Jupiter has moon. Indians also did know, there are papers that you can look through the work of Dharampal, and Indians also talked about the moons of the Saturn. Okay, they did it in a metaphorical fashion. That is our tradition. That's how we do it, so that people remember as interesting stories. But back to celestial is equal to terrestrial. So far I talked about celestial, but that has to reflect in the terrestrial. Okay, for prosperity. Like just looking at the stars, bright stars, will not feed our stomach. Okay, so what about what is happening on the terrestrial? I'm going to start with, just like I showed you, how we can identify a specific update in Surya Siddhanta. I'm going to now show you the application of astronomy, how we can identify a specific ancient events using astronomy. Okay, this is again my work. In case of Valmiki Ramayana, I extracted like close to 600 astronomy references. And when you put them together, like in a jigsaw puzzle fashion, like solving a crossword puzzle or solving that Rubik's Cube and getting all the sides right, this is what you find. So what you see here, say Earth at the center, sun is rotating because that's our Earth-centric view. The moon also you can see here. The seasons, okay, the cardinal points, the summer solstice, winter solstice, vernal equinox, spring equinox. But I am not showing you the map of the celestial map of today's. I'm showing you the celestial map of 14,000 years ago. In fact, the exact year, based on my calculation, when Ram was born, 12,240 BC. And the day, you can see, just for fun I'm saying, but that the moon is in the Punarvasu nakshatra. And lo and behold, the sun is where? It was a Sharat season. Whereas remember, when we celebrate Rama Janma in our times, Chaitra Shukla Navami, it is the second part of Vasanta Rutu. Okay, but Ram was not born in our times. Okay, so there is other phenomenon called precession of equinoxes, where the whole cardinal points, they go through a complete cycle with respect to this nakshatra in 26,000 years. But quickly, so out of those 600 Ramayana references, I'm just going to give a highlight. Okay. For example, the month of Chaitra, when Ram was born, and if you see the descriptions of Chaitra month from Valmiki Ramayana, you see them in a very different fashion. Okay, for example, here iti bruvanta mudita, this comes as analogies and metaphors. Iti bruvanta mudita pratyanandana nrupanrupam vrishtimantam mahamegam nardanta iva barhina. Like the descriptions of a Chaitra month are those of dark clouds and where the peacocks are dancing. Or Chaitram Sri Manayam Masa Punya Pushpita Kanana. The forests are filled with flowers. Of course, that can happen in Vasanta Rutu, but then remember, Ramayana didn't happen in our times. It did not happen 2000 years ago, and it did not happen 4000 years ago. Although Sheridan Pollock speculates that in his own mind, sitting in his chair, that it happened in 500 BC, but that's another subject. Okay, there is another reference from Valmiki Ramayana. This is from Nashik, when the not Hanuman, Lakshman, Ram, and Sita are at Godavari, okay? And Lakshman is describing the situation of the Hemanta Rutu. He says, Nivrutta Akasha Shayana Pushyanita Himaruna. The sun is setting at this during the Hemanta Rutu on, now this is not the only verse, by the way, for the sun's reference. You have to go 10 verses, all 10 verses previous to this, and 5 verses after. But the astronomy reference is here. Pushyanita Himaruna. Sun is setting on the nakshatra Pushya. Okay, when during the Hemanta Rutu. In our times, it is around Purvashada, Uttarashada, Mula, Jeshta, somewhere there. Okay, again, we have to go through the precision of equinoxes. It takes us back to that 14,000 years ago. Or when the Chaturmas begins, number of you would know that, it begins at the rainy season, like in our times, it begins, and then people take certain vrata, like they will do certain things, they will not eat certain food, they will fast in a certain way, they might read certain literature and whatnot. There they are defining that now Bharat must have planned his vrata at the Ashadhim. And again, the Ashadhim, not in the sense of the lunar month of Ashad, which is where our Chaturmas begins in our times. There Ashadhim in the sense of when the sun is in Ashad. Just like in, at least in Maharashtra, I don't know if that's true in Kerala or wherever you are. In Maharashtra, when the rainy season begins, or especially before it begins, and if the rain falls, we call it Mrugacha Paus. Okay, it's the rain of Mruga. And that time we are not referring to Margashirsha month. We are referring to the fact that sun is in the Mruga Nakshatra. In that sense, it's Ashadhim. I'll go a bit fast through this. Something so beautiful. Look at these points. If you can see my arrow, this is the point of called North Celestial Point, North Celestial Pole, South Celestial Pole. And they, in 12,000 BC, they are closest to the brightest two stars that I just shared with you from a Surya Siddhanta reference. Now I'm giving you reference from Ramayana. This is Brahma Rashi or Vega or Abhijit in the northern hemisphere. In the southern hemisphere, it is Agastya or Canopus. They were pole stars. And in Valmiki Ramayana, you see the references to both of them, okay, for the pole star in the south and also pole star in the north, the Brahma Rashi. But there is one more reference, and that is the Vasanta season, Vasanta Rutu falling near Ashwin. Vayam Ashvayuje Masi Kal Sankhya Vyavastita Prastita Sopi Chatita Kimatat Karyam Uttaram. This is Angad is saying when they are looking for Sita. He says, look, this is the Vasanta Rutu, this is Ashwin, even that is passing away. We left in Sharad, we haven't found Sita yet. Now what is going to happen? What are we going to do? All these kind of references you put together, it brings us to that 13 millennium BC for Ramayana. Quickly, celestial to terrestrial, that's the event. Now let's talk about land migration. There is evidence. People say, well, we hear about this AIT, Aryan invasion theory, or what I call Aryan invasion dogma or Aryan invasion nonsense, right? No evidence. Aryan invasion, again, the Christopher Hitchens razor apply. A claim made without evidence can be dismissed without evidence. For Aryan invasion, there is no evidence whatsoever in any discipline of science, none. Okay, so now let's look at, actually it was the other way. Now granted, people are coming in and going out all the time, but that is not to be confused with the whole nonsense of Aryan invasion. But what I want to show you is that the post-Mahabharata, actually we have the evidence of post-Mahabharata, that is after 6 millennium BC, migrations from out of India, and how, of course, we have evidence in the human gene for outward migrations, going back a long time, even before Ramayana and after Ramayana, before Mahabharata, after Mahabharata. But here we have a wonderful evidence from non-human species, okay? It is for the cows, the zebu cows we see the zebu cows and their migration. This is genetics paper. Okay, post Mahabharata migrations from the outskirts of India. This is like Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan border. Okay, to the west, to Anatolia, which is Turkey, France, Spain, Italy, and rest of the Europe. And the timing that you can stamp is 5500 BC through 1600 BCE. Okay. Now keep in mind, we can only talk of the evidence that we have. Okay, and the evidence still does exist for pre and post Ramayana and pre and post Mahabharata migrations. That was, they were sometime going for different reasons, to get certain ingredients, to explore the land. Okay, and they could do it with the help of very sophisticated astronomy, because you need a knowledge of astronomy even on the land. Quickly, celestial equal to terrestrial. Okay, so our little mouse, okay, the domestic mouse. Now, how many of you have known this? Some of you might have seen this, and it is very important to actually become familiar with it. This is a 2007 paper, Bonhomme from Germany. That simple domestic mouse I'm talking, the house mouse is also called. Okay, there are few species, 3 or 4 distinct, like the primary species, and there are many subspecies. But when they did the genetic study on the domestic mouse, what did they find? The map can, the picture is worth 1,000 words. The origin of a domestic mouse, so that is a domestication of a mouse, not just cows, not just pigs, okay, not just dogs. By the way, there is evidence for all of them being domesticated first in India, but I just briefly refer to cows. But the domestication of a house mouse is also in India. Now you say, what's the big deal? Well, the big deal is a house mouse, domesticated mouse, is tightly connected with settled civilization, is tightly connected with agriculture. Now people immediately jump and says, but oh, I heard somewhere. Well, don't believe on what you hear. Okay, go 20 levels deep to find out what the truth is. People will tell you that agriculture came from Mesopotamia to India. Well, there can be an exchange. We are not doubting that. But when Mesopotamia was not even a habitable place, when Indian continent was doing tremendous agriculture. These are peer-reviewed papers. I'm going to just show you. The domesticated house mouse is connected with agriculture, as I said. And agriculture, and definitely harvesting of grains, harvesting of fruits and everything, and their storage and their cooking, the evidence exists. This is in Indian subcontinent. Like specific one that I'm referring here is from Sri Lanka, going back to 43,000 BC. Okay, then a well-planned agriculture evidence we have, where a storage of grains, isolation of grains, which is to say selection of grains for sowing and all that. We see the evidence in, again, Indian subcontinent going back to 16,000 BC, and harvesting of grains, storage of grains going back to 43,000 BC. So agriculture has been practiced that long, and it may be practiced with hunting and other things possible. That's fine. Quickly, I'm showing you the evidence of that. Now, if how do this house mouse goes there? House mouse goes with a migration, goes with the transfer of agriculture, goes with the transfer of human beings going there and settling. This one, I don't know if you can read it, but this is where the house mouse is found. So one is, I'm showing it started from India and went everywhere, but now that is the location. But the second one I'm telling you is a timing. And what I'm showing you in the second picture is the Mediterranean Sea, Bhumadhya Samudra. And wherever you see those dots, the circles, that is where you can see the evidence of a domestic mouse. Okay, so this is like here, Turkey. The dark dots are like a area of a Turkey and whatnot, Syria. How far back? Lo and behold, 12,000 BCE. And then you can also see through all the times down to our times. Okay, so people, I said before that people were migrating. We have other evidence, and now even the evidence can be corroborated, validated, supported by even a simple, humble domestic mouse. Okay, I'm almost done. Okay, celestial to terrestrial again, geography and astronomy. Now, the question would come, do the Indians knew about the world geography? The answer is yes. I would encourage all of you to read Valmiki Ramayana, Kishkinda Kand, where Sugriv gives directions to his 4 Vanara parties in all directions. And I have given a separate talk. You can go to YouTube and check with my name and write down Sugriva's Atlas, and you will find multiple parts. Indians, or the Sugriva, 14,000 years ago knew of the world from India all the way to South America to Andes, in the south direction all the way to Antarctica, whereas Europe tells us they found Antarctica in last 200 years. In the west, India knew geographically all the way to the Alps, and in the north, they knew all the way to the Arctic Sea. In Mahabharata times, the next graph, it doesn't tell us how far they knew, but it tells us how far actually the four brothers, the Pandava brothers went during the Rajaswa Yajna. Okay, and the description of Arjuna tells he going all the way possibly to the Arctic Sea. Now, whether he went there or not is not clear, but there is a description of it. Okay, all right, and quickly, I think this is last or second last slide. I will not read this. Ayurveda and the connection of astronomy and astrology. Okay, so for example, to a Ayurveda professional must have a knowledge of Vyakarana, number of the Vayayikas there, with like that, Sankhya, Vaisheshika, Jyotisha. It's important. Okay, or just like you say, Chakshu Suryo. This is from Charaka Samhita, Sushruta Samhita, and Charaka Samhita. Disham Kshotre. In the ears. Now the modern science tells us that the sense of direction is in the ears. Okay, Disha. Okay, but I'll move on fast. All right, then certain types of these different types of Vyadhi, you can say. Okay, and they can be diagnosed with the help of astronomy, astrology, or particular cycles, like what phase of the moon it is going on. Like moon is called lunes, right, in Latin. And you would have heard the word lunatic. Some people, their mental state, again, not a laughing matter, I'm just smiling here, but a mental state may get disturbed. Actually we all get disturbed. In some people it's more pronounced around the full moon time, around the Amavasya time, and so on. Okay, so that the time of the month, the time of the year, the season is all to be taken into account in diagnosing a patient. And that's why the astronomy and calendar is very important. Okay, into Ayurveda also. Quick summary. So Indian astronomy is very precise, accurate for accomplishing the task for which it was designed. They were not unnecessarily obsessed with over precision. If naked eye resolution is 1 arc minute, they went for 1 arc minute. Okay, and it is very ancient, definitely more than 40,000 years ago. Indian astronomy is original and is filled with ingenious, creative, and practical innovations. Deep antiquity of Indian astronomy can be corroborated with events of Indian Itihasa, like I just gave you a quick example through Ramayana, out of India migrations, and ancient Indian knowledge of geography. The last word on the creativity and antiquity of Indian astronomy is yet to be written, yet to be spoken. Why do I say that? For example, what I presented to you just from Surya Siddhanta, some of the references, are possibly maybe like 20, 30 verses out of 500 verses of Surya Siddhanta. And we have not touched other astronomy texts of India, like Aryabhatiya, for example. So there is a lot more to be said. Vedanga Jyotish of Lagada. There are so many other texts, so much interesting information. Rigveda itself, Valmiki Ramayana itself, Mahabharata itself, even Kalidasa's work. I'm willing to say, I will assert that Valmiki, Vyasa, and Kalidasa, they were also great astronomers, not just great Pradnyavan people, and not just great poets. Okay, all right. So that's my last slide. If anyone is interested more into my works, these are my books in India. That's how they look on the cover, from Subbu Publications. Subbu Publications. If you go subbupublications.com or org, online, you can find them. If you are outside India, you can get all these books. That's how they look from Amazon. Let's give the control back to Professor Gauriji.
Yeah, thank you, Nilesh ji. It was such a wonderful, and how time just flew away. I didn't even realize it's almost 10 to 7 now. But there are a few questions for you as expected. Let me take one by one. Babu SK, he has 2 questions for you. One is, Vedic period, does it predate Surya Siddhanta?
Okay, this is a great question. I don't know the answer. This is a great question because it's easy for me to answer. The answer is I don't know.
Okay. Another thing is, why the Mahabharata dating is so important?
Again, a wonderful question, and that is because I know the answer. Because what happens is, if there are no 2 views about it when it happened, And sometimes if we can get away with the idea that it happened a very long time ago, that's sufficient. However, when we want to understand the development of culture, development of science, development of technology, internally, but also with respect to other cultures, other civilizations, a precise and accurate timing of not just Mahabharata, but Ramayana, Sushruta, Charaka, Rigveda, everything becomes very important to make a sense out of it, to understand the context.
There is a request that can you show your books names, slide, so that can remain there for a while.
Okay,
Okay.
I
Yeah.
can do
And
that.
meanwhile, I can ask you a few more questions.
Sure.
Shivadi, one of our students, he has asked, you mentioned that Indian astronomy has a lot of influence on the European Renaissance. Can you give some examples?
Oh, so in Indian influence on the European
European
Renaissance, and
Renaissance.
what are the examples? The
Yes.
astronomy is the best one. Now the research is coming out that even the Copernicus model, okay, that when the Copernicus put the model, he essentially learned these actual numbers and whatnot from Arabs, and the Arabs, of course, admit that they learned it from the Hindus. So that is the connection. If you go further to Kepler's time, Kepler had to, so Kepler did a great job, but to convince people some of the data or some of the formulations that he used, there is enough reason to now believe. We cannot always pinpoint and show the camera showing when he picked up that document, that the knowledge came from Kerala astronomy, something connection. I mean, we call Kerala astronomy because that's how Europeans do it. Wherever they find, they give the name of that place, So Indian astronomy, but coming through Kerala. You also see, for example, very recent times, again, last 200, 300 years, the Europeans coming here, documenting Ayurveda text, translating it, taking it there, and then working on it, synthesizing. Now, recent times we hear turmeric and whatnot, but this is not just the first time it happened. It is happening for a long time. The Welcome Group, if you know, they did that a few decades ago. And this is going on in every field. Mathematics, the decimal place and zero, before that there was no way they could keep track of their calendar. Just to quickly tell you, the calendar, say 500 years ago, the European calendar had gone out of whack, out of the sync, with a gap of 44 days. Now any Indian will just hit on his head and says, how can that happen? If you continue to look at the sky and what is the position of the full moon, even just visually seeing it, you can fix the calendar. It cannot have a delta of more than 30 days. But they had gone their calendar
Beyond
out of
that.
sync. Beyond that, 88 days. And how is that possible? So yeah, it very much helped in the medicine, vaccination, surgery, in every possible way. Again, I would encourage people to go to YouTube, type Nilesh Oak and type whatever the words come to mind, like Sushruta and Ayurveda, and you will find some of these.
Rupali Kavishwar has a specific question. She says that Aryabhati, from the internal evidences, it is 499 CE. So how can you go beyond that?
Oh, very good. So internal evidence, and this, if whoever asked that question, if that person is interested, my email is there on the first slide. Dr. No, if you know the James Bond movie, but anyways, Dr. No .5561 BCE. So you won't forget the Ramayana Mahabharata date. Dr. No.5561 BCE at gmail.com. You can send me the email. But yes, so there is one update. Definitely, maybe more updates in Aryabhatiya in 499 CE. But just like Surya Siddhanta also has an update around that time, 580 CE. But you can also find additional updates. And myself and Rupa Bhati, we have found the updates, and we will be publishing that work. And I would encourage you to read that work when it comes out.
And wait and watch till it is published.
Yes, thank you.
Krishna Pandurangi has asked you, whatever presentation you made today, have you posted it on YouTube?
Today's presentation, no, I have not posted it on a.
I mean, similar to this research, I mean.
In different forms. For example, Sangam talks you will find on Surya Siddhanta. But yes, this work in some form has shown up somewhere.
You mentioned about Sugriva sending his Vanara Sena to all the four directions. Based on that, Sneham Joshi asks a question like Sugriva's Atlas, are there ancient texts that mention sea voyages of Indians?
Okay. Well, actually, I mean, yes, the answer is simple yes. For example, you can hear the story of a Sagara and whatnot, but Gauriji can tell you from,
I wanted to tell you that I would
yeah,
take this question. In the Rig
please,
Veda, we have
please. Yeah.
so many references to navigation, and especially in the Ashwi Sukta, Ashwini Kumara, they saved Bhujju, who was drowning in the sea, with the help of Shataritra Nauhu.
Hmm.
Now, a boat, a ship, you can say, a big vessel having hundreds of oars, Shataritra. So there
There
are
you go.
beautiful references in Rigveda itself. So
Yes.
I could have taken that question. Then Alok Tripathi is asking you, Ravana Samhita and Lal Kitab, are they like related to astrology?
Okay. I have heard these names, Alokji. I have never seen them, but I would say this is a wonderful project, Alokji, for you to work on, to work on both of them, find out what it is, just like I did for Valmiki Ramayana, Mahabharata, Surya Siddhanta, Arya Bhattiya, Sushruta Samvita, Charaka Samvita. I would want you to take that project. Thank you.
A very personal question to you, Nilesh ji.
Yeah.
Okay, I mean, asked by a participant, a chemical engineer and a polymer technologist, how did you enter into this kind of work and research?
Okay, I will answer, and I will tell you that is a very universal answer for those people who do these kinds of things. These kind of
These
things, in
kinds.
a sense, they come from they do have their one profession, but they do something else, and it is simply, I would say, the love of it. I mean, that's easy answer. But also many times I would say, and in the Indian tradition, it's easy for people to understand. Like Professor ECG Sudarshan, again originally from Kerala, he has written an article called Causality and Grace, and I would encourage everyone to read it. It's a very small paper where he says we don't know why it happens. What different unknown forces compel us, drive us in a certain direction. And actually, when we make a big discovery, usually people will think, actually that's another question, Gauriji, people ask me, so how did you feel when you demystified Arundhati Vasishta or Bhishma Nirvana or Ramayana? And I'm saying, people think I must be feeling like, oh my God, I did it, I'm so proud. Actually, you don't feel proud. You feel actually very humble. And you don't even trust your discovery. You said, is this really what I am seeing is what is happening, or I am being deceived? Am I deceiving myself? So it's a very humbling experience. It's also very releasing experience. I mean,
Very
when I
rewarding also must be very rewarding when you
very
get so
rewarding,
many.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, but it also feels like, when I did Arundhati Vasishta at the 2009, I feel like, not that I don't want to die or anything, but if I die right now, I'm most happy. I'm ready to go. That's how I felt.
There is one like direct question. See, in the last 500 years, if world saw so much of science and technological developments, and if you're dating Ramayana as old as 12209 BC, then why India missed upon all these developments?
Okay, so the great question. So last 500 years, what we have seen is a significant development, especially with the European Renaissance and many gadgets. Now we have these all gadgets like through Zoom, and that the way we are communicating. And how come we miss that? Right? You can see these descriptions of advanced science and technology in our ancient narratives. What we don't have is the exact photograph and a manual how to use it. In what way they were there, we don't know. We can only see the descriptions. But to answer that question, see, Indians also developed it because Indians were prosper. I mean, if you go back 2000 years until the Islamic invasion, you will find that China and India together were contributing to more than 50% of world's GDP. And it was happening through this astronomy, agriculture,
Right.
commerce, and navigation, right? So the point is, but the European, in a very materialistic sense, wanted to just explore and consume, and some good things did come out of it. But that is that. I mean, the two questions are almost unrelated. That say, so what you see in 500 years, you should not try to build our civilization, or I mean the world civilization, based on what you're seeing in the 500 years. That would be an extremely myopic view of civilization.
Earth Mishra has a question. Can the carbon dating of historical sites present across India's countryside help to find hidden evidences of Ramayana, Mahabharata, or any such past evidences, I mean, past events?
Okay. Yeah, the answer is it's always possible. But before someone jumps there and starts digging somewhere, I would encourage them to study my books. I would encourage them to study scientific acumen like Vijnana Buddhi through our darshanas, all our darshanas, by the way, but also like Western development in science, philosophy of science, like Sir Karl Popper. Read our narratives, understand how carbon dating works, understand when it does not work, understand how archaeology works, and understand how much of beggars we are when it comes to archaeology evidence. You cannot just dig someplace and expect that you will find something, and how much costly that affair is. And then do not suggest to somebody else, take a pick and start digging yourself. Yes, you may find the answers.
Aboli has a question regarding the chronology which you have presented, the time wise. She is a little bit confused, regarding the term yuga. And when we say Kali Yuga is 4 lakh 32 K years and Dwapara is 81 lakhs and this and that, how can we say that Ramayana is dated 12,000?
Again, beautiful question. And I will give a short answer. I have given a long answer in like 5 parts ongoing series, in multiple places, but one on Sattology. I call it, Gauriji, Yuga Enchilada. Okay, the Spanish dish. Enchilada, the Spanish dish, is like has a khichdi, like all mixed.
Khichdi, yeah.
So what I'll say is, when we think of a yuga, immediately we jump to this one particular definition. Very sad and unfortunate is that Kali Yuga is a 432,000. Twice that is a Dwapar. 3 times that is a Treta, and so on. This is actually a purely astronomical definition to define the, just like I showed you today, accurate and precise orbital periods of the planets, of the celestial bodies. It's there in Surya Siddhanta, it's there in Aryabhatiya. It has absolutely nothing. One should never use this to define the chronology of Itihasic event, historical events. But unfortunately, that has happened. In fact, there are 4 different types of yugas. There is a theoretical, there is a philosophical, there is a practical, and there is a chronological. What has happened here is we are taking a theoretical definition meant for something else and applying it to chronology. And that has made all this chaos. I have given, like, I'm giving a 5-part talk on Sattology. I would encourage people to type Nilesh Oak and Yuga and search for those episodes.
There are many more questions. I think I would stop by 1 or 2, Nilesh ji. One is why, Margashirsha is called Agrayana.
Margashirsha is called, right. No, that's a good question. Why Margashirsha is called Agrayana? It has a long answer. Did I stop sharing? Because I wanted to stop sharing, by the way. Yeah. Okay. Good.
I think yeah.
So it's a long answer. The short answer is, I'll say, the starting point, or in a simple language, when the sun goes around the earth, as seen from the earth, the point it becomes the slowest, as seen from the earth, when it's how far it goes in the east direction every day, it becomes the slowest, which is to say the apogee, the farthest distance of the sun and earth. Right now, when it happens, the sun is in the Mruga Nakshatra. That is why the Nataraja, the Kala Purusha, Mruga Nakshatra is also known as Kala Purusha, and the Kala also has to do with the Kali. Kali also has to do with the slowing down. And that's why that is where a new year can begin. That's why you have Bhagavad Gita, for example, what is that? Masana Margashirshoyam.
Masana Margashirshoham Ritunam Kusumakaraha.
Correct. And also, Gauriji, Nakshatrana Maham Shashi. That Shashi
Nakshatrana Maham Shashi. Yes.
Not Shashi the moon, but the Nakshatra Swami as a Shashi. And that is again Mruga Nakshatra.
Because he is called Udupa.
Yeah.
Udun Pati, Udu Nama Nakshatram. Nakshatran Pati, Nakshatrani Pati iti Udupaha. Okay, one question quickly. I'm borrowing your word. Okay, quickly. So, how do we cultivate deep reading of the Indian books rather than the superficial read which is propagated in the market? This is asked by Sai Gunaraman.
This is a great question. Great question, Saiji.
So how can you
And
guide, the young and the old here to go into the deeper insights of our ancient rishis?
right. Well, once you become a speaker, you get into this papa of giving people advice, Okay. Well, my simple advice, I try telling different things to people, like read Karl Popper, read this, but then people start reading Karl Popper and they run away. They said, I will never listen to Nilesh advice again. So my suggestion would be begin with the Bhagavad Gita with a good translation. And I mean, that's how, by coincidence, my journey started. It started with Bhagavad Gita. In fact, it was Vinoba's Gitai that my mother taught me when I was like 4 or 5 year old. I would say take a Bhagavad Gita with a good translation. And I am convinced, I'm not sure if it will work for everyone, that the Bhagavad Gita and a study of it will show you the way which text you should read next. And that can be even totally away from the Indian text. It can be another Indian text, but Bhagavad Gita will show you the way. At least that is my conviction. That is my Shraddha.
People are interested to know many more things, especially how do you manage such deep research and how do you maintain your family, your kids? Don't they complain? I mean, how do you give time to them as well as your research?
Well, I'll tell you some funny thing on quickly, shortly. They do complain, but they're also very supportive. They're very supportive of me. That goes with it. But something I'll say, the yesterday, and just Ashwini started this yesterday. Okay, so inspired by the Bhagavad Gita group that she has, she actually discusses it with 3-4 other friends of hers. That one of her friend did a mauna vrat, like for 5 hours, just no electronic media, no nothing, no lip movement, and just doing that. So Ashwini did that yesterday for 6 hours.
Okay.
And I cannot tell you how happy I was. Okay, and so I told Ashwini,
she must be listening, right?
Yes, she will. She may not be listening, but she will listen to this when it comes out. But I told her we should do this on alternate days. One day I will do the Mauna Vrat, another day she will do the Mauna Vrat.
That will facilitate everybody, yeah.
Yeah, and frankly, she participates. I mean, she's an astrology student, and she participates with what I do. We go for a walk while we discuss our research, and we have such a heated discussions. The neighborhood dog starts barking.
It was really fun, Nilesh ji. Not only listening to your talk, but the so lively discussions we had. The participants are also so curious to know so many things, and you have really answered all their questions. If I have missed any, I think I should not beg pardon. You should approach Nilesh Oak on his Facebook directly. Shoot your questions to him, and he will give you long answers on the Facebook. Okay. So with that, let me conclude with a concluding prayer. Om Purnamada Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnameva Vashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Harihi Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Harihi Om.